comes to four-wheel drive, one word says it all. From the engineering experts at Jeep come two leaner, meaner vehicles. Introducing the all-new Jeep Cherokee and Jeep Wagoneer, two rugged vehicles that are leading the way. With the newest advance in Jeep four-wheel drive technology, the Command Track system. This system allows you to shift on the fly from the fuel efficiency of two-wheel drive to the superior traction of four-wheel drive high. At the heart of this system is the Model 207 transfer case, a new part-time unit. This training film will focus on service procedures for the Model 207 transfer case. Because this unit is new to the Jeep line, it's important that you familiarize yourself with the procedures we outline so you can provide first-rate service and accurate diagnosis. Our presentation will be divided into two areas. First, a look at the important design features and basic operation of the 207 and its four-wheel driveline companion, the Command Track front axle disconnect system. Then we'll cover the procedures you should follow when overhauling a 207 transfer case, procedures designed to save you time. Let's begin with a look at the important design features and operation. The Model 207 features a two-piece aluminum case. This lightweight design, together with a 2.6-to-1 reduction ratio, make the 207 ideally suited to the new downsized vehicles. The case contains a number of principal components: an input gear, a planetary assembly, and front and rear output shafts. Two drive sprockets and a drive chain to transfer torque to the front output shaft, and a unique synchronizer assembly consisting of a synchronizer hub, synchronizer ring, and sliding clutch sleeve, which allows the driver to shift between two-wheel drive high and four-wheel drive high while the vehicle is moving. The case is shifted using the range selector lever. This selector allows the driver to choose between four ranges. Two-wheel drive high for increased fuel economy on hard surface roads with good traction. Four-wheel drive high for better traction when driving in snow, mud, or sand. Four-wheel drive low for slower speed and greater torque under tough driving conditions. And neutral when towing is necessary. Correct towing procedures are outlined in the reference book included with this film. In the two-wheel drive high range, the input gear transmits torque directly to the rear output shaft. Should the driver desire the four-wheel drive high range, the sliding clutch sleeve engages the drive sprockets, sending torque to the front output shaft. When the driver selects four-wheel drive low, the planetary assembly provides a 2.6-to-1 gear reduction ratio. And should the driver select neutral, the planetary assembly disengages. No torque is transferred. The Model 207 transfer case is used with a new Command Track system. This system features the 207 unit, a modified Model 30 front axle, and a vacuum control system. The modified Model 30 front axle is designed with a special disconnect feature that includes a vacuum-actuated shift fork and shift collar. This allows the axles to rotate freely when in two-wheel drive, improving fuel economy and reducing unnecessary component wear. The disconnect is accomplished via the vacuum control system. The principal components of this system are a vacuum control switch mounted on the transfer case, an axle shift motor located at the disconnect point of the front axle, and a four-wheel drive indicator lamp vacuum switch mounted under the hood near the heater blower motor. The four-wheel drive indicator lamp is located in the instrument cluster and comes on when the axle shift motor is in the four-wheel drive position. For a complete understanding of the operation of the vacuum control system, consult the reference book included with this film. The book will prove a valuable source of information on both the operation of the vacuum control system and the operation of the 207 transfer case. When checking or adding lubricant to the Model 207, the level should be even with the bottom of the filler plug hole. Note the location of the drain plug. Be sure to use the recommended AMC Jeep Renault automatic transmission fluid or equivalent labeled Dexron 2. Using the correct lubricant is important to the overall performance of the transfer case. The correct fluid capacity for this unit is 4.5 pints. Finally, note that each transfer case has an identification tag located on the back of the case. This tag provides the transfer case model number, the low range reduction ratio, and the assembly number. You'll find this information valuable when ordering replacement parts. Now that you're familiar with the design features and basic operation of the 207 and the command track system, let's turn our attention to the overhaul procedures you should be familiar with in order to properly service a Model 207 transfer case. The overhaul procedures we'll be performing require a number of special tools. Be sure you have each of the tools before you perform the procedures. The special tools, as well as the overhaul procedures, are detailed in your Jeep Cherokee and Wagoneer workshop manual. Specifications and torque values are included. Your workshop manual also contains a valuable service diagnosis chart. This chart will save you both time and money by helping you determine whether an overhaul is actually necessary. The chart outlines the procedures you should follow to check the various driveline components and the linkage adjustment. Follow these procedures before you consider an overhaul. Again, they're designed to save time and money. Once the transfer case has been removed from the vehicle, you can begin disassembling it. First, remove the front yoke. The yoke sealing washer and nut can be discarded. For easier disassembly and reassembly, place the transfer case on a bench fixture like the one shown here. You'll find directions for building this handy time-saving tool in the reference book that accompanies this film. Next, place the transfer case in four-wheel drive low. Note not only the four-wheel drive low position, but the other positions as well for future reference. Then, remove the extension housing. Use a soft hammer to tap on the shoulder of the extension housing. This will break the sealer loose. You can now remove the bearing retainer. To do so, first remove the rear main bearing snap ring from the main shaft and discard it. Then remove the rear retainer attaching bolts. Tap on the shoulder of the retainer with a soft hammer to break the sealer, and remove the bearing retainer. Next, remove the pump housing from the transfer case and remove and discard the pump housing seal. Also, remove the speedometer gear and oil pump. Then, install a new seal in the pump housing using the special tool shown here. Now you can remove the rear case bolts and, using a screwdriver, separate the rear case from the front. Be sure to use the slots casted in the case ends to pry the halves apart. Do not attempt to wedge the halves apart at any point on the mating surfaces. Once the case halves are apart, you can remove the magnetic chip collector. Then remove the front output shaft and drive chain. It may be necessary to lift the main shaft slightly so that the output shaft will clear the case. Next, pull up on the mode fork rail until it clears the range fork. rotate the fork and rail counterclockwise until the mode fork pin clears the shift sector. Then remove the fork and rail from the case. You can now remove the main shaft from the transfer case by pulling up on the shaft until it separates from the planetary assembly. Disassemble the main shaft by removing the snap ring, synchronizer assembly, synchronizer ring, drive sprocket, and thrust washer from the main shaft. Then mark the sliding clutch sleeve and the hub for reassembly reference. And after removing the sliding clutch sleeve from the hub, remove the snap rings that retain the keys in the hub and remove the keys. At this point, it's important that you clean and inspect all the main shaft components. Check the bearings for wear and damage and replace them if necessary. Also, inspect the gear teeth for signs of excessive wear and damage, and check the gear splines for burrs, nicks, wear, and damage. Likewise, check the snap ring and thrust washer. Replace all components that exhibit signs of wear or damage. If the two drive sprocket roller bearings appear worn or damaged, press them out using the special remover and special driver handle shown here. Press a new front bearing into the drive sprocket using this installer and the special driver handle. The installer should be used with the shoulder facing up. Remember, when installing this bearing and all others, the flat, numbered surface of the bearing should be facing up. Also, all of the bearings must be correctly positioned to avoid obstructing the bearing oil supply holes. After installation of the bearings, check each bearing position to ensure the oil supply holes are not obstructed or blocked by a bearing. Reverse the special installer so that the shoulder is facing downward and press a new rear bearing into the drive sprocket. Install the drive sprocket thrust washer, the drive sprocket, the synchronizer ring, and the synchronizer assembly on the main shaft, and install a new snap ring. Next, move the shift sector to the neutral position and remove the planetary assembly and range fork. Then remove the snap ring that retains the planetary pinion carrier to the annulus gear. With the snap ring removed, you can separate the pinion carrier and the annulus gear and remove the inner and outer thrust rings. These components should also be cleaned and inspected, and any worn or damaged components replaced. To reassemble the planetary assembly, you'll need to first install the inner thrust ring on the planetary carrier. Then install the carrier in the annulus gear and install the outer thrust ring and snap ring. Next, remove the planetary thrust washer and remove the input gear. If the input gear pilot bearing needs to be replaced, remove it using the special remover and slide hammer shown here. Install a new input gear pilot bearing using the special installer and driver handle. Next, remove the thrust bearing and thrust washer. Then inspect the case, detent spring, and shift sector. If it's necessary to replace either the detent spring or the shift sector, first remove the vacuum control switch from the case. Then remove the detent spring retaining bolt and the shift sector retaining nut from the case. When you install the shift sector, be sure to use a new O-ring. Then reinstall the bolt and nut and torque them to the correct specifications. Also, be sure to reinstall the vacuum control switch with a new O-ring. Next, inspect the lock plate for wear or damage. If necessary, remove the bolts attaching the lock plate to the front case and remove the lock plate. Apply a 1/8 inch bead of AMC gasket in a tube on the lock plate sealing surfaces before installing the lock plate in the case. Next, using a screwdriver or a brass drift, remove the front output shaft seal as shown here. The input shaft seal and the rear extension housing seal should be removed in the same fashion. Remove the front output shaft snap ring, then turn the case over and remove the bearing using a hammer and drift. You can install a new bearing using the special installer and driver handle shown here. Then install the bearing snap ring. Install a new front output shaft seal as shown here. Next, if necessary, remove the 2 input gear bearings from the transfer case using the special remover and driver handle. Then install 2 new input gear bearings using the special installer and driver handle. Be sure to install the front bearing from the front of the case and the rear bearing from the rear of the case. Also, install a new input gear seal using the special installer shown here. Finally, remove the front output shaft rear bearing from the rear case. Use the special remover and slide hammer. Use this special installer and driver handle to install a new bearing. With that, let's reassemble the transfer case. First, install the input gear thrust washer and thrust bearing. Then, install the input gear and the planetary gear thrust washer. Position the range fork on the planetary assembly and install the assembly in the case. Make sure the range fork is engaged with the shift sector. Then place the transfer case in 4-wheel drive low. Install the main shaft into the case, making sure the planetary thrust washer is aligned with the input gear and planetary assembly. Next, position the mode fork on the synchronizer sleeve and rotate the fork clockwise until it aligns with the range fork. You can then slide the mode fork rail down through the range fork until it's fully seated in the bore in the case. Position the drive chain on the drive gear and the front output shaft, and install the front output shaft in the case. It may be necessary to raise the main shaft slightly to seat the front output shaft. Next, install the magnetic chip collector in the case. At this point, you can apply a 1/8 inch bead of AMC gasket in a tube on the mating surface of the front case and install the rear case on the front case. Install and tighten the case bolts to the correct torque specification. The 2 bolts with washers must be installed in the dowel pin holes. Also, note the location of the 12-point bolt, which is used for mounting the shift linkage. Install the pump housing over the main shaft and install the oil pump gear on the main shaft with its recessed side facing toward the case. Also, install the speedometer gear. If necessary, remove the rear main shaft bearing from the rear retainer using a hammer and brass drift. Install a new rear main shaft bearing in the rear retainer using the special installer and driver handle shown here. Apply a 1/8 inch bead of AMC gasket in a tube on the rear retainer to case mating surface and install the rear retainer. Be sure to line up the pump housing tabs with the notches in the rear retainer. Then torque the bolts to the correct value. Next, install a new snap ring. Make sure the snap ring is fully seated in the groove. If the bushing in the extension housing is worn, replace it. Use the special remover and the special installer and driver handle shown here. Install a new seal in the housing using this special tool. Then, after applying a 1/8 inch bead of gasket in a tube to the extension housing mating surface, install the housing and tighten the bolts. Finally, install the front yoke using a new sealing washer and a new nut. That completes our look at the new Model 207 transfer case. We've covered a lot of information today, the special design features and basic operation of the system, as well as the procedures you should follow when overhauling a unit. Keep in mind that all of the information is detailed in the reference book that accompanies this film. The book also contains additional information you'll find useful, such as a complete list of all parts to be replaced, so be sure to keep it handy. In addition to viewing this film, try to attend the next AMC Jeep training course held in your area. Your zone parts and service department can provide you with the necessary information. You'll find this course to be a valuable source of hands-on training. Remember, your most complete source of information is your workshop manual and any published IS notes. Be sure to refer to these references before you perform any of the overhaul procedures we've covered. An accurate diagnosis could save you both time and money.